So, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host another Red Cloud webinar on uranium today. We are going to hear from Strathmore Plus Energy Chairman and CEO Dev Randhawa, and John DeHoya, he's Director and Technical Advisor, Terence Ozier, he's the VPX of the company. Now, during today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook, and then we will take your questions. You can type as many questions into the chat boxes at any time. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During the Strathmore Plus webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of its corporate presentation. That can be found on the corporate website, strathmoreplus.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Strathmore Plus. Now, with that said, why don't I turn the floor over to Dev and John and Terence to speak about the company. Guys.
Sure. Glad to do so. Well, Strathmore, I mean, you can't make a story for us until you first make a story for uranium in the United States. And that's a pretty easy story. When I began the industry, they told me these tales. Back in the 70s, John can tell you that America used to produce, 40, 50 million pounds, which is pretty significant, but they only needed like 4 million pounds. And then today, America needs 50 million pounds and produces very little. I don't think I'm being far stretched by saying less than 1 million pounds might be produced going back 6 months, forward 6 months. So, and where is he getting it from? Well, other sources. One of my most entertaining things to do with my friends from the States, even sophisticated businessmen, is to tell them that every 10th light bulb in this particular restaurant is fueled by Russian uranium, because it represents 10%, and nuclear power represents 20% of the overall mix. And so it shocks people that a country that's usually quite sharp and, that would let that sort of a Germany move in gas. Like Germany thought we can trust Russia. So, but I think from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of political noise and all of it positive towards U.S. uranium. And then so we had a number of bills have been passed at the Congress level. We need them passed at the Senate level. If those happen, if they actually ever do a ban, uranium prices will go up a lot more. And finally, I think, Canadian uranium will be fine, but it'll certainly push up the price of uranium very significantly. Next. Disclaimer, next. Yeah, so this is just, people, I think all of you investors have all felt the pinch of the big, uranium being at, oh my goodness, world's coming to an end of $86. But again, that's a very short-term view of uranium prices. I think some investors expected uranium to go to 106 and go to 212, like that. Well, anybody who's been in a bull market before knows you're going to have pullbacks. That's healthy. Right now in the world, you got 2.5 billion people and another billion without any electricity. So you got 3.5 billion out of 8 billion people that don't have enough energy or have none. So the story for uranium is a story for uranium worldwide. I mean, that we need how much energy by 2050? The numbers are mind-boggling, and I don't think they're even taking into account the real growth in China, which I see seems to be higher than they seem to want to show. But these are various articles that you will see in papers today, Japan, Europe. And so it's the first time in my career, and John, can talk a bit about it as well. It's the first time you've seen the left side of the aisle say we need nuclear power. We don't want, to be hanging out all our wishes with the Russians. That just is not wise. So they're seeing that. And also, we just need a lot more clean power, just clean baseload power, which isn't available with fossil fuel. Next. This is an overview of how many reactors we have, how many are being built. It's insane. Um, Someone, I think, David, you were on the panel in Toronto, when they were comparing this bull market compared to the old one when it was 2007. And the biggest difference was that back then there was actually still a surplus of uranium. This bull market, there's a shortage. So it is similar, but it's better than the bull market we had in 2007. Next. Um, Look, there's a lot of good pieces of information in here, but the main thing to see is when you've got the UE, labeling nuclear power as green energy. That's really positive. China plans to build 150. They, I don't know who the fellow was, but he was joking and said, "Why can't we do 10 a year?" They're not happy with doing 6. I mean, if I've been to China, I've done business with them, I've been to the research facilities, and I can tell you they're very serious because their needs are more basic. If anybody that's been to Beijing know how polluted the cities really are, it's disgusting. You put your hand on any car on the side of the road, and it's like soot everywhere. And so they need energy and a lot of it. So when you've got Asia, you've got Europe, um, and certainly, the amount of money that President Biden has put on the table for the industry is very positive. Next. This is our fuel cycle. Basically, to tell a lot of people that what they don't want to hear is that it takes a long time sometimes from yellow cake to getting it to um, into our plants. Next. Um, we've only got a market cap around 13 million, and I think it's 16 million minus 3 million cash. So our enterprise value is 13 million. But you've got a group of people here who have performed in the past. When I first started Strathmore back in the original one, eventually we gave dividends. By the time we were done, we would find something and take the rest of the stuff and spin out and keep repeating that and rinse and repeat. And we've done this now 4 times. And so it's important because, if in real estate is location, 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 I argue that in junior companies, it always comes down to one thing: people. John will add some comments later, but John's been in the industry a number of years. Um, I would say close to 45, 50. Hey, John. John started very, very early in his career and has actually seen a number of these cycles, and more importantly, knows where a number of good projects are that just got left by, and that's one of the reasons we have 3 projects in our company that people didn't bother looking at, and we're doing well with at least a couple of them. So essentially, we've got a track record here of finding something, sell it, take the other piece, find something, do it again. And so, it's not often mining companies give dividends, but we have done exactly that. We're in F3. We're going to be spinning out F4 shortly. So that's pretty fabulous. We won a bunch of awards. And what's important, though, is that, we're all long-term players. We've been in this industry a long time, and it's pretty exciting to see the wind behind us. So I know John's excited to be in this part of the cycle because, whether it was Briax or it's Fukushima, the uranium industry has been a very tough place to be for a long time. Next. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass things over to Terrence a little bit. So this is a small reactor. So maybe you can tell what's happened lately with it, Terrence, a little bit, and then more importantly, go into our properties. If you can take that on.
Yeah, so Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they're part of a group, TerraPower. They're a Natrium nuclear reactor they want to build in southwest Wyoming. They picked one of 4 soon-to-be shuttered coal-fired power plants. And they ran into the problem again of acquiring high-assay, low-enriched uranium from the Russians. And So they've been stalled back a couple of years, but I feel that they are going to be having a plant built by the end of the decade in Wyoming.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And hopefully in other additional facilities around Wyoming and other coal-fired power plants across the nation. There are other groups doing the same thing. It's a pretty exciting thing for Wyoming. I'm always asked about the project from people in the local neighborhood when I talk about I'm in uranium and things of that sort. They always ask about this reactor, and it's a slow process that they're going through, but the government's providing a large amount of money for it, and it's exciting for the state and exciting for the American people. That's for sure. Next. So in Wyoming and the rest of the United States, you can see here, Texas is an area that's got uranium projects that are active. The Colorado Plateau down in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah is another active area for a lot of future mining. And then, of course, Wyoming. Wyoming, we are looking for in situ recoverable operations at our Agate project and our Beaver Rim project, a more conventional one at our Night Owl. And there's several companies now that are ramping up production in the state. Energy is ramping up production at Lost Creek. They just announced last week, that they were going to start building their satellite operation in Shirley Basin. Their operation is 5 miles from ours. John drilled and dug uranium out of that project in the 70s. He knows quite a bit about the area. I'm far more familiar with the Beaver Rim and Gas Hills area, having spent many of my years working in that area, having drilled on our project in Beaver Rim. We had a very successful drill program last October in Agate. Found a nice deposit, shallow, 100 feet, 150 feet deep, appears to be saturated in groundwater, which is ideal for in situ leach. And hopefully we can build this project up this year. We intend to drill and go from there. Next, please. Here's the different areas around the state. We have active operations going on right now, like I said, at Energy. They're going to ramp up their Shirley Basin operation. UEC is going to start their Christensen Ranch Irrigary deposit operation this year. Cameco Smith Highland Ranch, they're in standby, but I have a feeling that they're going to get back into the production soon. Energy Fuels is making a decision on their Nichols Ranch operation also. And we are in 2 locations that have mined the most uranium in the state. Gas Hills was the second largest district in the United States after the area down in New Mexico, and Shirley Basin was the second largest in Wyoming and probably the 5th or 6th largest district in the United States. Great areas for in situ leaching. They've been shown to be able to leach uranium. Cameco has a fully permitted project immediately north of on Gas Hills, and then, like I said, Shirley Basin, Energy is going to build their operation there. Next, please. So our Agate project, we have a bunch of drilling that we acquired from Kerr-McGee that was public. So we've been processing that data. We drilled on the project. Let's go to the next slide. Much easier to see a picture. Okay, University. Let's go to the next slide. We can come back to University of Wyoming. So here's a slide of what we were doing in drilling. So we went out with conventional water drilling rigs last year. You can see in the cuttings in the middle picture, we collect every 5 foot. We log these cuttings lithologically. You can see the very gray rock at the lower end. That's the mineralized zone. You can see on the far right the gamma log itself. That's a 20-foot intercept at 0.089 uranium. Very nice deposit that we found. We hit 2 very good thick zones, and we intend to go back and find more this coming spring and fall and summer. We're permitting now for an additional 200 holes for the spring program.
And I just want to add that it's the location. Who's all around us? That's important.
Yes.
When you've got big players around you, and especially if, like the likes of Energy, and I think John's made it public as well, John Cash, that they have permits, but they'll need feed. So that's one of the main reasons that we are, staying close to Energy is that, they're one of the true. I think people ask me who's going to, produce. I said I thought pretty sure John Cash would be up there, and we were right. They've got the permits, and and those things. If we can work with them, will save us cut our time in half and financial in half.
Yes. So on the next slide, So one of the things we were doing with last year was with the University of Wyoming. They acquired a $200,000 grant to do studies on roll fronts. And our project is ideal because it's shallow. I ran into the gentleman the year before when we were looking for geophysical work out at our Night Owl project. And then he came back to me and said, hey, I have this opportunity to get this grant. Can we study on your project? And I said, absolutely. So they came out, they did a bunch of ground geophysics. They came out and probed some of our holes that we had left open for them. And they are going to be back as soon as they can in the spring once the ground is thawed out and cleared from snow and mud. And they're going to continue their study, and they're going to get expanded onto additional areas of our property. We hope that we'll be able to use this information to target roll fronts without having to drill all over the place. Let's go out and let's see if we can target these spots from their research. It's pretty exciting. They seem pretty excited about their findings so far.
Yeah, well, we can't wait, because obviously any money you can save from drilling and etc., more you can learn. We're excited to see what results they've got. And also, we are looking at using AI as well in the region to determine what's happened in the past and trying to do a better predictor of where the uranium might be.
Yeah, one of the goals I hope is if we could apply this to Beaver Rim. Beaver Rim is a deeper deposit, anywhere from 700 to 1,000 feet deep. And that would be really exciting if this sort of information could be applied to that.
Yeah. Next.
Next, please. Next, please. So this is some of the drilling that we did last year. The property to the west and north of us is owned by Uranium Energy Corporation, UEC. Just north of that is Cameco. This is the area that Kerr-McGee had drilled probably, 5,000 to 7,000 drill holes. We have 600 drilled on our property. We have data for about half of it. So it's an exciting little spot. And, like I said, we hit mineralization 21 feet thick at 0.09. That's a really nice intercept for a shallow uranium deposit. So our plan is to expand the mineralization to the west and to the east, and hopefully down some additional targets that I did not drill this past October that we will drill in May, is our goal, May and June. And we will expand our project areas. And so this is from, actually, the lower image is from a Kerr-McGee drill hole, bunch of drill holes they did out in the Red Desert back in the 70s. I used to have this 8-foot-long Mylar image of this in my old Strathmore office. It's somewhere in here. And so this is what an idealized roll front looks like as you drill down and you get the gamma signature. And so we clearly have hit tails. We've clearly hit the seepage zone out in front of the redox. Now we're targeting that thick gamma zone where we're going to get the higher grade, maybe 0.2, 0.25 type typical grades out in the Shirley Basin area. That's what our target is. So that was nice to see that we have a typical roll front out here at the Agate deposit.
Amen. Yeah.
And then David's quote.
Yeah, it's a wonderful quote. I think people can read it, but we'll let people read it and we'll jump ahead.
So Beaver Rim.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe, John, maybe this is your chance to kind of step in a bit. Why do you like Beaver Rim? More importantly, why do so many geologists like Beaver Rim? You're talking to John Cash, he likes Beaver Rim. What is it about Beaver Rim people like and see the potential?
Well, Beaver Rim was the first area I had in mind when Dev contacted me 2.5 years ago. And then we found out that Terrence had an interest in that, and we were able to hire Terrence to come on board. The interesting thing about Beaver Rim, this is the area where all the mineralizing solutions came in through the formation into the gas hills. If you go from kind of northeast to southwest, that's about where the rim lies on this. The area to the north is the area where the gas hills is, where they've mined all the ore in the gas hills. The area to the south has been basically unexplored. Many people have wanted to go up there. And when I was a young geologist, I was head geologist for Federal American Partners. just on the downside of the rim, and we had the UPZ shaft. And this high-grade mineralization lies just adjacent to where we're at. This area to the south of Beaver Rim, where you see our properties, the yellow ones here, this is where the solutions came through. And we always wanted to go up there and do drilling. We were never able to because we had so much on the bottom in the gas hills. The companies could never find time and or money to go up and explore. We had too much. Now we know differently. We've mined most of the gas hills out until you get to the old FAP properties close to Beaver Rim. So we're excited. Terrence, like he said earlier, went out on some of these properties when we were the original Strathmore and found a stacked roll front on one of our properties. And we're going to go in there this year and check it out. Pretty exciting. This is the area where the mineralizing solutions moved. And you can see where they ended up, coming from the southeast to the northwest. You can kind of get a look, and if it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see that when you start a connection, it came right through our properties that we currently hold.
Yeah, that's like I said. That's what makes this, it's like it's the area just never got touched for whatever reasons, and we're excited to go back in. We raised a bunch of money, a bit about more money this year, and that'll give us an opportunity to test it. And what are your thoughts on it, Terrence? Why do you like it?
Well, exactly what John said. There's clearly information that's not shown on this. For instance, between the Lucky Mac Miracle Mile and our Strathmore property is Cameco's 2-mile long peach trend. They probably have 15, 16, 20 million pounds there. That was going to be one of their first in situ well fields. About where it says the UPZ shaft, they have another 10, 20 million pounds over there. Cameco is sitting on a tremendous amount of uranium between us and the lower gas hills. Their project immediately to the north of West Diamond was going to be brought to mineral patent. They had to prove that they had 6 feet of 0.1% uranium on all their claims. There are hundreds of claims that they were going to take to patent back in the 80s, in the 70s that never were. And our projects, these roll fronts are on our projects. A hole I drilled in 2022 on the east side of the West Diamond project hit 3 roll fronts on top of each other. That's ideal. It's not just one. We have potential for 3, maybe 4 or 5 of these stacked roll fronts. And that builds up your mineralization. That builds up your pounds quickly. The North Sage project, we drilled just north of it, the gray area that is now still controlled by Encore. That's a former Strathmore project that I drilled on. We drilled roll fronts within 100 feet of the south end of that property, just north of the North Sage. We are permitted for drilling upwards of 50 holes this season. We're targeting for 30. And hopefully we'll get more. Hopefully we'll get more drilling. We'll get more money, and we will find more uranium. I'm excited about these projects. I know more about the West Diamond and the East Diamond, but there's clearly mineralization shown on historical maps and other information that I've acquired over the years on our North and South Sage projects. I think we have a tremendous opportunity here to find a very large producing mine. The Lucky Mac Miracle Mile, as you see, produced 40 million pounds of uranium. The thing was enormous. It's 2 miles long. This is a big, huge company making project here. I'm excited about Beaver Rim. It's the first thing I staked back in 2013 after the original Strathmore was taken over by Energy Fuels. And I went out here with a business partner and acquired some land, and we were able to acquire that from have Strathmore acquire that from us. And that's where I'm at. And then I knew of the areas over in Shirley Basin that we staked, and John and I happened to just say, hey, let's do this. These are great areas to work in. And I'm excited about both those projects. That's for certain.
Thank you. Next. Night Owl.
So our Night Owl project, last year we drilled on it in October. and it wasn't as successful as we hoped. We did hit mineralization, and there's some nice grades out there. It's all at the surface. So we continued our airborne survey last year, and we are going to go out and do some more ground reconnaissance this year on our main claim group. You can see the 2 property areas, and then the north one is a state mineral lease that we intend to do some more groundwork on, and then potentially do some drilling this fall. So that's where we're working at with that. We're processing that data with our help from our friends up at F3 who are working with us, Sam and Ray and their team. So this data is being analyzed, and also with hopefully University of Wyoming might come out here and do a little project work on this also. Their main target is roll fronts, but this is also a close by project that they may want to do some assistance with us.
Next. Yeah, we've got a working agreement, which I'm very excited about. We've got to find some more pounds, but at least we know if we find our pounds, we don't have to go through the huge permitting process, or not just the looking for permits, but also the cost of building all the plants and everything else. So this is a very important agreement, especially for a small little company like ours. We're very happy to have a good relationship with John Cash and his strong crew. I believe that they are, true leaders in the U.S. industry. And if we can, take advantage of our properties and their permits, it could save us a lot of money as we move towards production as well. Next. This is our schedule for the year. All depends on budgeting. But obviously, as you've heard, we're very excited about Agate and Beaver Rim. And depending on how much funds are available as we move forward through this market, that's our schedule at this point. Next. That's our team, us 3 that are here, and plus our CFO who's not able to join us. But that's really it. David, did you have particular questions you wanted to ask?
Great. Thank
David
you, Deb.
Talbot?
Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm here. So
okay, no worries.
Different computer system. I gotta hit buttons in different directions. So, So guys, thank you for a great presentation here, Deb, John, Terrence. It's always great to hear different points of view. It makes a good discussion. So we will kick off the Q&A portion of the webinar right now. Reminder, everybody online, you could type your questions into the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. So I guess, Dev, you've run both US-based and Canadian-based uranium companies for a long time now. Do you find that your shareholders differ that much from one to the other? Are US-based investors more apt to invest in US stories? Or
Yeah, I think so. I think people... It's a question, why do Vancouver people like to vacation in Cabo versus people in Toronto? It's just convenience. I just think that it's easier to understand their backyard, and people like their home cooking. So I have found that absolutely that U.S. investors like the U.S. stories. And, it hasn't shown up yet, but I do think that with the amount of pounds that the U.S. uses of uranium and their need, that U.S. pounds, any pounds that we find here, there are advantages of both sides of the border. I mean, we've got great grades, but they don't need grades. We need mills, they don't need mills. So there's quite a difference between the 2 different business models. But in terms of what we're trying to do, our market cap is very small, and we've got some pretty good loyal shareholders, which we're very happy with. So I like both sides of the border, but obviously if, the U.S. uranium stuff gets, if Russian uranium is kicked out, it's going to have a radical impact on the price of uranium for everybody, but a big difference for pounds in the ground in the U.S.
Okay. And Terrence, you've mentioned Wyoming's new small modular reactor program. Do you have any idea on timing of when that uranium might be required, or how much uranium might be needed for 1 or 2 or more of those reactors?
unfortunately, no. I'm not a nuclear engineer. I apologize. No, I do not.
Okay. No, it's something that that's something the media tends to gloss over as well. So, okay, I guess maybe more in your backyard. What's really attracted you guys to Wyoming in particular instead of other known uranium jurisdictions?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious is that, it's certainly become the place. I think in terms of what was produced in the last run, it's David. All you have to do is walk the streets and talk to people in Wyoming or anybody from Wyoming, and talk uranium, and they get it instantly. Like they just get it. So it's none of that NIMBY, and they really understand how important it can be. So it's from my perspective, it's easy, and plus also rules. I can't remember the name of the rule, but Terrence will that allows us our permitting, can go along side by side with federal. What's that called?
We're an agreement state.
That's right. And so maybe you can explain that, Terrence. That's very beneficial.
Yeah. So what that is instead of having to do two permits, essentially for the feds and for the state is taking it over. They have to have all the regulatory requirements minimum that the NRC has. The NRC eventually gets involved to overview it, but they're not the final say. The state is very active in that. They're going to get to the point where they even want to be in charge of the reactors that are being built and that sort of thing. And I work with the DEQ, I work with the BLM people. They're great to work with in the state. And they understand what's going on, that the state is a place to be mining for uranium. And in situ mining is an ideal way to produce uranium in the state. It's going to be difficult in Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, those states down there for hard rock mining. There's a couple mills, at TSX.V, there's the other one at, White Mesa, but they're going to have their own amount of materials locked up. And then, I like this state, like Dev was saying, everybody's excited about it. I'm always mentioning it to people that, I work out at URE. Another guy goes, I work out on the drill rigs out there. We got 14, 15 drill rigs running. They are a good bunch of people. We're excited to be working with UR Energy down the road. Dev was saying about, our neighbors. Our neighbor in the Gas Hills, immediately north of us is Cameco. Immediately north of that is UR Energy owns the old Lucky Mac mine, the 40 million pound. They got several million pounds of uranium. They may look to leach somewhere down the road. They have our Black Hill, our Beaver Rim project's 45 minutes away from their Lost Creek operation. Well, maybe a little bit longer, but we are in close proximity to these places. During the last uranium cycle, 4 uranium mills were built in the state. So it's a place to be operating, and plus I live here. So
yeah, is there much M&A potential left in Wyoming? Is there something else that you might look at? I know there's let's maybe 7 or 8 companies working in the state. You don't necessarily hear as much noise coming from the Gas Hills yet, as opposed to elsewhere in let's say Utah, Colorado, Texas.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the activity is going on in the Gas Hills. I know
it'll happen. John, I'm sorry, David. It'll happen. As long as there's guys like Bill Sheriff and Amir, in the hood, you can see things happening. Obviously, whoever grows to be the biggest first wins, because the reality is the bigger your market cap is, more bigger funds you attract. That's one of the reasons why people grow, and also the markets want to see. The markets also want to see growth. They pay for blue sky, so that's another reason it could come in our favor if we can, crank up, find enough pounds. We are in good shape to maybe sell the company because it'll just be another fee for somebody at that point. So that there's just a financial reason why you see people all the time, adding assets everywhere they can, so the market cap's higher to attract more capital. That's you and I both know that's just what happens.
Yeah. Now, you guys mentioned being an agreement state, and that's where the state actually does the licensing for the NRC. So there's a question here, is that for plants or mills only, or is that also for drilling? So did you want to answer that question, somebody?
Terrence?
For drilling, no, we don't have to deal with them under the. That's different. I work with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, if they own the land or the mineral rights, and then the reclamation bond goes through the state Department of Environmental Quality. So we have an office. The group out of for my Beaver Rim project, they're both in Lander, 45 minutes away. I can go to their office any day and chat with them. The projects in Shirley Basin are ran out of Rollins and Cheyenne. I took both those geologists out on site last year reviewing our reclamation work. They were very excited about that. They like to be involved in those sorts of things. They want to see what we're doing out on the ground. So that's who we deal with when it comes to drilling. If we ever end up with a private mineral lease, then you're still dealing with the DEQ and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the state, if we ever acquired a state lease, which we have at Night Owl, and there's some that I'm interested in, obviously, around the Beaver Rim area, but they want to hold on to them. So that would then just be licensed through the DEQ again, too.
Right. Okay. ISR, or in situ recovery, produces over half the world's uranium. Why have you guys decided to focus on ISR potential rather than conventional mining? Is this a function of geology first and foremost, or are you seeking specific projects that really suit ISR?
I think you go for the best project that get you to the production the quickest. You can't be, but however, ISR means you don't need a mill, and that's a big advantage, right? Whereas if the previous life of Strathmore, we had the Rocahonda and everything else. Well, a mill would have been a lot of work and a lot of money, and it would have been tough. So you don't need a mill. It's something, and Wyoming is beautifully made. Geologically, it's made for it. So,
Yep. Okay. Now you guys are working in and around the prolific Shirley Basin. Why does Strathmore and other companies say that Shirley Basin's probably the best basin for ISR production, even though all current and recent production is really elsewhere, such as Great Divide or Powder River? Why is this the place?
Well, John worked there longer than anybody. John, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, I worked out there for 20 million pounds worth of mining. It's got the lithology, the permeability, porosity, the aquatards, everything that's necessary for ISR mining and recovery. The depth to the mineralization, the groundwater, the ability to move that groundwater, everything in Shirley Basin is textbook. In fact, that's where the first ISR was in Shirley Basin. And I actually was fortunate enough to mine through a previously solution mined area by open pit. So I was able to see what the effects were, good and bad. And Shirley Basin is just ideal.
Mm-hmm. Now, not a reflection of your project, but, the term grade is king comes up all the time in mining and exploration, and certainly higher grades are positive. But, do grades really matter as much if you've got porous, permeable rock that leaches well for an ISR, in an ISR situation?
It would also depend on the parameters of the material that you're trying to mine. But grade is still king. However, if you have a large thickness of permeable material with, let's just, instead of an aquatard, let's call it a shale or something like that on top and bottom, you've got the right pressure, you can saturate this ground and effectively mine a lower grade. In fact, I'd rather have a thickness than I would a grade for ISR.
Okay.
We saw a lot of channeling with high grade deposits.
Right. Okay. Now specifically to your project, your Agate project, you drilled a lot of holes there last year. Great hit rate, nice grades, nice widths. You also mentioned plans to drill later this year. At least Terrence did. When might we expect a resource estimate there? Can you trust some of the older holes to help with that resource estimate, or do you just need to keep drilling for a couple more seasons?
Oh, I anticipate. I would hope we would be, I'd hope we'd be able to have a technical report and a resource estimate this winter. That's the goal. And to be able to use as much of that Kerr-McGee database as we can. We found some open holes that were left open. I hope that we probed them. I hope that we are able to say exactly which drill hole it was historically that Kerr-McGee drilled. That's the ideal situation with historic data. At least it points us in the right direction. The first hole we drilled out here, we hit 10 feet of 05. I mean, that was a really nice first hit. And I just picked a spot. I said, oh, there was a bunch of drilling here. Let's pick a place and let's drill it. And that's how we're going to expand our drilling, like I said, to the north and the east and then the west as far as we can. And then down further south on our property, I found some drilling on the furthest end. I thought it got much shallower down there. No, it's still 100 feet deep, some decent intercepts down there. And it's like, well, we need to go down there and see what's going on. If this thing can stay saturated at 100 feet deep, and we can say, saturate a 30-foot zone, you can get a lot of uranium out of the ground. I mean, you could put a lot of wells in, much cheaper than you could at 500, 600, 700 feet. Like John said, it'd be much better to have a nice thick zone of lower grade than a thinner zone of high grade, because then you're just going to channel right around and you're not going to get your lixiviant onto those grains of sand and pull the uranium off. I find that project to be pretty exciting. And I think there's some growth potential, obviously, on our property and surrounding areas on claims. UEC owns property to the west and north. Cameco owns a large deposit north of that. And then on the east side of the highway, you have UR Energy building their project at Shirley Basin. That's going to be exciting that they're going to have a plant out there.
Okay.
That was good news for Strathmore.
Yeah. Now, Terrence, you mentioned probe the holes. Okay. USISR companies typically don't assay. They use gamma logs, gamma probes, maybe PFN tools. Can you maybe explain why you do that instead of sampling and assaying? Certainly it saves money, but why can you get away with that here?
Well, because that's how it's been done for so many, many years. And then you do pull core out of the ground. You do assay work for disequilibrium. It'd be lovely if we had our PFN tool from Strathmore again. That was a fantastic tool. I loved running that thing. In immediate disequilibrium was being told to us. The other issue is it's not easy to core sand. It falls apart, It can be done. We know we'll be able to do it, but that's just another fact for it. Up in Canada, they core everything. And they assay everything. You got assays of 15, 20, 30% uranium. It was rather stunning to see grades like that in person. And it's easy to go in. You drill a hole. We were punching holes for 150 feet. We punch them in an hour. We probe it. We're done in 2 hours on the hole. And then we continued. We were drilling 8 holes a day out there with just one drill rig. And then
bear in mind,
all of us up.
Bear in mind, please, that we did prove by production in Shirley Basin and Gas Hills, for that matter, using the gamma tool.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe just another teachable point here, you use the word disequilibrium. So, gamma logs essentially measure radioactivity. So disequilibrium essentially is when radioactivity might be high, but the uranium might not be reflective of the uranium there, or radioactivity might be low, but the uranium is there. So, and that's a function of these things moving pretty quickly, right? The
gamma tools are reading bismuth 214. It's a daughter product of uranium. Uranium, as you know, that's why we leach it, is highly mobile in an oxidizing state. And if it has not come into equilibrium with its daughter products, which takes about 1 million years, and if water flows through, the uranium could be moved away from the site it was at, and then you get an overreading of the uranium concentration, and you can have the opposite. At the old Strathmore, we had a deposit where we drilled 10 feet of 0.4 and it came back 10 feet of 0.4. It was highly out of equilibrium. Of course, it was only 50 feet deep and it was highly oxidized ground. And then we had the exact opposite effect where we had 10 feet of 0.2, which was really 10 feet of 0.2%. It was 10 times out of equilibrium to the positive. Overall, Shirley Basin is going to be essentially in equilibrium. When you're at the heart of the roll fronts, you're going to have more uranium than is being shown on your gamma tools, and then vice versa, way out in the seepage zone or out behind in the tails. The gas hills overall had a 10 to 15 to 20% equilibrium advantage, and that was known throughout the area over decades and decades of mining this material.
David, I've got to sign off. I've got a hard cutoff for another call, but I'll leave you in the hands of the boys. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Dev.
Take care, Dev.
Take care.
Take care, Dev.
Okay, continuing on, we do have another technical question here from the audience. With respect to ISR ore bodies of less than 200 feet deep, do you need an aquitard in order to recover the uranium?
Yes, and that's ideally what we have at Agate. We have the lower sand, and below that is 30, 40 feet of clay, and then we have between our lower sand and the middle sand. These are the two main zones of sand that were mined in Shirley Basin. We have another clay zone that's anywhere from 5 to 10 feet thick. Now, it may disappear at times, but overall, it looked like after hole after hole after hole that we were drilling, it's a very consistent aquitard above and below our mineralized zone of sand. And hopefully when we drilled into it, it was gray and it was saturated in water. Our plan is to put in some monitor wells this year, do some pump tests possibly the year after, that sort of thing, to see what this deposit can actually do. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to get core for, leaching studies and those sorts of things. But a lot of that's been done nearby. Our deposit may be just a little bit different than at what's going on at Shirley Basin for your Energy's project, since they're 5 miles away. But overall, these are going to be so very similar. That's what we're excited about with UR Energy, is that synergy. They're permitting. They have a permit. They have their regulators. These guys have done all this stuff. If we could piggyback on, at Agate or even at Beaver Rim on their license, it would save us years. It would save us money, and it would provide them feed for their mills down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Great segue, because those are our next questions to go targeting UR Energy. They just announced they were going to move Shirley Basin forward, expect production within a couple years now, 24 months, I think they said. So to start, they will start with a satellite plant and then ship resin to Lost Creek for processing. What can you tell us about your development agreement with UR Energy?
Well, it's in the beginning stage. They approached us, on a conversation one day with John Cash, and said, "Hey, there's some working things there with us." So it's still a process. We were looking at it in the beginning also at our Night Owl project, because they do have a fully permitted tailings disposal at their site at Shirley Basin. So going forward, that's my goal, is to keep in touch with those guys, keep moving our project going forward. They'll see that we have a vial deposit that could be in a satellite operation down the road also. That's my goal. That and Beaver Rim. If Beaver Rim is big enough, that is probably going to require its own facility.
Okay. But, UR Energy, I think they're capped at about 9 million pounds measured and indicated right now. So I think your project helps make it attractive to extend their own life of mine. So do you see yourself going alone, or participating with them, or even being acquired by them, or selling the project? What are your options here?
All three.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what we find.
Mm-hmm.
If we could build this up to 1 million pounds, I think 1 million pounds is a minimum, maybe 2. For a satellite operation. It just depends on the price. Of course, if it's only 80 feet deep, that in its own right is so cost effective. You're not drilling a 500-foot well, spending all that time with all this different development. I find our our future with them to be a good one. And that's where what we're hoping for.
Right. And UR Energy, they also say labor is an issue. So do you think that shortage of potential skill levels is a bottleneck for growth? And how do you think that might be resolved? Obviously, you might resolve
UR
it
Energy has 15 drill rigs out running in their operation at Lost Creek. They've brought in 4 or 5 from Texas. It just takes organizing, finding someone, and getting the right drill crews. And that's something that's going to be going forward is not easy. As the oil and gas industry had its a drop off a few years ago, we lost a lot of employees in the state. A lot of people are getting older. Now you got 70, 80-year-old drillers out there. That's a little too old at this point. Can you convince young men and women to get into the industry? That's what is another thing. These are good paying jobs. And I think that's one thing people need to remember. Once you start really talking, especially in Wyoming, they're tough men and women around here. They grow tough kids. They like to go out and work. You show them these what they can earn on drill rigs. They'll go out and do the job.
Okay. Maybe a couple more questions on some of the other assets, and we'll wrap things up here. But your initial work at past producing and Night Owl project, what did you learn there? That's certainly a unique limestone hosted deposit.
Well, what I found the most interesting was a 30-foot highly altered limestone away from where we were at. The limestone is about 30 feet thick there. The zone that's brecciated and mineralized where I took you, David, is only about 10 feet, and it's on the bottom of that zone. And that highly altered zone that we found is fascinating. It was brick red. You don't see limestone that's red. It should be gray. So that was something that I found interesting. The deposit seemed to be in a very narrow area, and there's some decent grades there. So we still have some work to do. We want to do some leach studies on this material, and we got to go out on the ground and put our boots on the ground and get a sinometer out there and do some more testing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Beaver Rim, that's located in sort of a higher grade Gas Hills area,
Yes.
in a different part of the state. Is this potentially ISR amenable as well?
Yes, that is our goal. Cameco, like I said, is fully permitted. They actually dug 2 deep injection wells. They never fracked them, but they're out there. I've seen them. Their property is right next door to ours. Like John said, the UPZ shaft that he helped build and, went down and assayed in,
Mm-hmm.
that is immediately a mile north of our property. All those trends, the UPZ trends, the Allegretti trends, they all trend onto our property. Mm-hmm. From one way or the other. Either I've drilled on them or I have a bit of data showing where they're at. I wish I could acquire all the data up there because there's probably several hundred holes that were previously drilled on our properties,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not available at this time. So we're going to have to go out and do our drilling. And we're like I said, we're permitted up to 50 holes. We're planning to at least do 30. That's our goal this later in the summer. And that won't start until mid-July because we have the issue with sage grouse up there, mm-hmm. where we do not have that at Agate. We are out of the sage grouse core area. So we'll be able to start as soon as the ground is dry in Agate.
Okay. I guess last couple of questions. I wish Deb was here for them, but maybe one of you can answer them. How much cash does Strathmore Plus have at this point? And, how much drilling can you do before you need to come back to market?
Well, right now we can drill Terrence's plan without going to the market.
Yeah.
Okay. And your plan is which? At what projects?
It would be the Agate project up to 200 holes, 30,000 feet of drilling. And then it would be 30 holes on Beaver Rim for another at least 30,000 feet of drilling. Mm-hmm. And then, the groundwork and some additional work over at Night Owl and potentially some drilling over there.
Perfect. Okay. And maybe last question, and this might be a little early as well, of course, without technical studies, but do you have in mind a lower band contract price that you might need to sign in an offtake in order to get these projects commercially viable? So what's your answer there?
John? I'm not certain at this time.
I didn't quite understand that question.
Essentially, what uranium price do you need to make sure these projects work? That's a tough one for companies to answer without technical studies.
Well, at Agate, we're probably there. We just have to get a resource. At Beaver Rim, obviously, it's 10 times as deep, potentially. Now, we don't need 10 times as much money. But, Agate, the stuff on Night Owl on the surface, boy, it doesn't take a lot of money to produce that. But Agate is probably economic, depending on what the resource is. But, it's 100 feet deep. You're talking several wells a day. They're so easy and quick to put down. And you don't have the capital expense if UR Energy comes into production. And they're announcing that they're going to build out that plant. So the cost to produce agate, very minimal. I would have to say it's probably one of the lowest in the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. John and Terrence, great talking to you again today.
Nice talking with you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yep. Sorry, Terrence. Yeah, I'd like to thank Deb, John, Terrence from Strathmore Plus Energy for speaking to us today. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, March 20th, and that's when I will sit down with Uranium Explorer Aero Energy. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you for supporting Red Cloud's webinar series.